Tuesday, 18 August 2026, 3 Asia-Pacific AI stories before your first coffee. Hanoi's decision 3-3, took effect on 15 August, making Vietnam's list of 46 high-risk AI systems a binding legal category that carries conformity assessment and notification duties for any operator deploying covered models. Transport dominates the list, accounting for 31 of the 46 designated systems, with most operators facing a compliance deadline of 1 March 2027, and healthcare, education, and finance sectors given until 1 September 2027. The move lands as Thailand closed its public hearing on a separate EU-style risk-tiered AI Act on 14 August, and South Korea's National Assembly is one plenary vote from passing a bill that would let AI developers train on personal data without consent. Why it matters: Southeast Asia now has its first enforceable high-risk AI register, and the transport-heavy tilt means logistics platforms, autonomous vehicle developers, and fleet management vendors operating in Vietnam need to start mapping their systems against the list immediately. Builders shipping into multiple ASEAN markets face a patchwork problem. Vietnam's prescriptive list sits alongside Thailand's broader risk-tiering framework, and Singapore's voluntary testing accreditation scheme launching this quarter. Capital allocators backing cross-border AI deployments should price in divergent compliance timelines across the region. The second-order effect to track is whether Vietnam's list becomes a de facto template for other ASEAN members drafting their own high-risk categories, compressing the window for operators to lobby for narrower definitions before they harden into law. So, SK hynix posted second-quarter revenue of 79.32 trillion won and a 76% operating margin, with operating profit up 557% year-on-year, as the global memory shortage continues to reward suppliers while punishing downstream buyers across Asia. TrendForce forecasts conventional DRAM contract prices rising another 13 to 18% and NAND up 10 to 15% in the third quarter. On the other end of the same squeeze, Indian smartphone shipments fell 11.1%, as average selling prices hit a record $315, with phones under $100 collapsing 74.3% to just 4.5% in March. Why it matters: long-term agreements with American hyperscalers now lock in volume and cap quoted prices, which means smaller Asian OEMs, handset assemblers, and edge device builders absorb the worst of every price cycle. Indian consumers are already being priced out of entry-level smartphones, shrinking the addressable base for any company betting on mass-market AI services in South and Southeast Asia. China's YMTC holds roughly 13% of global NAND shipments and CXMT around 7% of DRAM. But new Chinese and Korean capacity is not scheduled until 2027, so nothing material loosens supply this year. Capital allocators should watch whether the margin concentration at the top of the memory stack accelerates sovereign chip fund commitments across ASEAN. Now, Singapore dominates Southeast Asian AI funding so completely that the rest of the region barely registers. Traxon data shows cumulative AI startup funding across Southeast Asia at $9.3 billion, over 261 disclosed equity rounds, with Singapore-registered companies accounting for virtually all of it. Vietnam sits a distant second at $19 million. In 2026 so far, AI startups have raised $4.1 billion across 23 rounds, roughly double the $2 billion raised across 41 rounds in all of 2025, while Clean AI's $2.8 billion Series D accounts for about 68% of this year's total. Why it matters: for builders and capital allocators outside Singapore, the numbers confirm a structural concentration problem rather than a regional boom. Seed funding rose 68% to $328 million, which is healthy, but Series B remains a visible gap, meaning startups that survive early stages still struggle to scale without relocating or re-domiciling to Singapore. Deal count actually fell to 127 rounds from 153, even as rounds above $100 million tripled to 12, signaling that capital is consolidating into fewer, larger bets. Regulators in Jakarta, Kuala Lumpur, and Ho Chi Minh City who want domestic AI ecosystems should watch whether this pattern entrenches Singapore as the sole viable funding hub, or whether targeted incentives can redirect some of that capital. The second-order effect worth tracking: whether Southeast Asian founders increasingly incorporate in Singapore purely for fundraising access, hollowing out local startup registries elsewhere. That is your AIinAsia briefing for today. Stay sharp, build well, see you tomorrow.